Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Safari Mack Explores North America. I'm Safari Mack, your guide and host, helping you make connections to the wild. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope we enjoyed our time with the polar bear up at the North Pole, because as I promised, we have left the Arctic and we are now back in the continent of North America, or specifically the United States, where today and for a little while we are going to explore one of the greatest treasures our country has ever made. Welcome to Yellowstone National Park, both America's and the world's very first national park ever created. And during our time in Yellowstone, we're going to meet with wolves, badgers, and bears. No, oh my. But today we begin our trek across this ancient supervolcano with one of the greatest icons of the American West, the American bison, or known as bison. But before we begin, as always, if you're new to my channel, hit that like and subscribe button so you can check out my other videos. Check out my Facebook page for articles and updates from conservation projects, as well as zoos and aquariums all across the world, as well as special actions that you can take in your own backyard to help conserve your local wildlife. And if you have a question about animals, or if there's an animal you would like me to cover in the future, feel free to send me an email, which you'll find the address down in the description below. But if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's begin. As always, we will start off with its evolution as well as its family. But before we begin, I want to make sure that we can understand a very common misconception. Despite being called the American buffalo, these bison are not really buffalo. As you can see by my friend here, the African buffalo, which we uncovered during our previous trek across Africa with the Big Five, buffalo have a pretty standard bovine appearance with these big curly horns, while bison don't really have that. Bison have horns, but it just goes more up like somewhat of a pitchfork, and they have this characteristic hump on their shoulders. So I just want to make sure that we were clear of that. Now, it's estimated around 2.6 million years ago that the bison originally started in Siberia, and then around 195,000 to 135,000 years ago, made their way across the land bridge that at one point joined North America during the previous ice ages. So they were there alongside with mammoths and other extinct megafauna. Let's talk about where they are today. Today, America has actually two kinds of bison, the plains bison and the woodland bison, which are known to inhabit Alberta as well as British Columbia. But today, we're just going to be focusing specifically on the plains bison. Now, as the name implies, they are found in semi-arid lands, grasslands, and sage country. So, now here in Yellowstone, you can find them inhabiting more of the river valleys as well as their grasslands. Also, they will inhabit some mountain areas as long as the slopes are not too steep, as sometimes the woodlands have also supported bison historically in the past. But whether they're in Yellowstone or anywhere else in North America, these creatures are a major influence in helping create and maintain the American grassland habitats. So this is what's led them to be a keystone species. So what they have done has helped shape habitats. It's helped with fire controls, drought issues. These animals are important for all these other creatures that call the American West home. Now, bison tend to live in very huge herds. Usually, it's during parts of the year, females and young are one herd, while males will live in another herd. But by the summertime, males will seek out female herds and begin fighting one another to determine who is going to be the top bull and who will be the one to mate with as many females as possible in the hopes of improving his genetic bloodline. After a long gestation period, the females will give birth to a single 50-pound baby in the mid-spring time. So right around this time, so a little later this month, as well as into April, we'll begin to see bison calving times. So calves will stay with their mothers for at least a year and then go off to live on their own to learn what it means to be bison. For females, it takes around 2 to 3 years to become fully mature, while males will take around 6 years before they're considered to be fully mature. Talk about taking your time. Now let's talk about their diet. At being a herbivore, these creatures have massive appetites and they have big quotas to fill. Males weigh around 2,000 pounds while females weigh only 1,000 pounds. Just to maintain this bulk, they need to eat up to at least 1.6 pounds of their own weight in food every day, or that's at least 24 pounds of grass and different grass-like plants as well as flowers. Just imagine eating that much. But of course, being bovines, you may know them also as ruminants, or animals that have a multi-chambered stomach. Now, what is the purpose of having all these stomachs? So as the food that they eat tends to be very tough and very coarse, or maybe not as quite as nutritious, they have to eat a large amount just to make sure that they can acquire as much nutrition as possible. So at first we may know that, cattle as well as deer and antelope, by the way, in case you didn't know, there are many different kinds of ruminants. They at first begin feeding on the grass and such by chewing it a little bit in their mouths. Then it goes to one of their stomachs for a little bit, but then has to come back into the mouth. This is where we get the term of chewing their cud for a second chewing, and then going back into their stomach just to take in as much nutrition as well as make it digestion a lot easier for their way of life, just to continue all the great services that they serve as a keystone species. Now I'd like to end today's episode with the influences in the human culture. Although really, I should rename it in a different way, because right now I want you to forget about the westward expansion. We'll get to that next week. I'm talking more about their influence in the Native American cultures. So by many different Native American tribes, they went by many different names. By the Blackfoot, Inuit, Tatanka in the Lakota tribe, by the Lakotas, Ivanbito by the Navajos, and even Coots in the Paiute tribes. So these creatures truly did play a significant role in shaping their lives, as well as their own livelihood. These creatures were revered. These animals were a source of life. If they didn't come, they would starve. But when they did come, it was a true blessing in disguise. It was seen as they were worshipped, they were honored. They did so much to thank the bison for their sacrifices, for food, but also for clothes, for jewelry, many different articles and many different pieces that serve important services for the Native Americans. In fact, here you can see a little bit, as I mentioned, the hide were used for like clothing, teepees, and all that. Bones were often used for different tools, horns for bowls, and skulls were really seen as for sacred rituals. But there's a lot more. Later today, ladies and gentlemen, check out my Facebook page, as well as stay tuned at around noon for a YouTube post of a link that I would like to share for you showing a little bit more of what all the different bits and pieces of the bison served for the Native Americans, as this really was, in a way, their economy. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all the time I have for today. Join me next week as we finish up with the bison and move on to the next animal in Yellowstone National Park. But until next week, this is Safari Mack. I'll see you all out there.